Hello and welcome to Military Mantra. In this interview, we have today Colonel Chandan Mateti, who have served in Indian Army for close to 3 decades. And in this interview, we'll try to understand his journey of joining Indian Army, life within Indian Army, and also as an officer and a Black Cat Commando, and various life lessons that he has learned over his service. So welcome, sir, and thank you for coming on this interview today.
Thank you, Akash. My pleasure.
So my first question to you would be, how did the journey of joining the Forge started for you? And what motivated you to join Forge?
Yes, I am a third generation, Fauji. So basically, my grand uncle was in the army during the Second World War, and my dad is in the army. My dad's three brothers, are in the army. My grandfather's younger brother was in the army. So it was kind of natural. The inclination was there in the Fauj ka ration jo hai, wo it's running in the blood. So the call of the blood was that you're going to don the uniform sometime or the other. So me, my brother, my cousins, we have a lot of people in the Fauj. So that's how it was since the childhood. Seeing dad growing up, he's seen a couple of wars, and we have spent our life in cantonments and studying in different schools and moving around the country. So that motivation was there, and there was this thing that yes, I need to serve the country, and the best way to do that is wearing the uniform.
Okay. Sir, if you can also put a perspective, which year are we talking about, and also your experience during SSB and your preparation.
Yes. So the year is I joined NDA in 1978. I finished my 11th. I think ours was the last batch of 11th standard, after which it became 10+2. So ours was 10+1. I finished my 11th in 1977, and I appeared for the NDA exam, and I got through in the first shot. And I joined NDA, 3 years in NDA, then 1 year in IMA. I got commissioned in 1982 into the Corps of Engineers. So that was the basic thing. That's where my journey started. The entrance exam, is like any other entrance exam. One has to prepare for it. Mm-hmm. So those days, coaching classes and all are very limited. We knew there was, they used to have this competition success and competition review magazine, which brought out articles on, skill quizzes and interviews, and, you could read of. So I think basically the preparation was, I was a subscriber to that magazine. My father always subscribed it. Mm-hmm. So that helped. And then SSB, yes, again, I did not really attend any coaching class as such. My dad spent some time whenever he could find, to kind of in his own military way telling me what I should do and what I should not do. So fundamentally, what the advice my father gave me was be yourself, because, you try to be somebody else, you're going to get caught out, because there will be no consistency in what you do over there. So be yourself and, use your intelligence. Think positively. So that's how it was. And I had my SSB in Bangalore, I remember, in 77, somewhere in the later half of the year. And I just went there and just followed what my dad advised, that be yourself. I was myself. I kept thinking. And I felt if I didn't know something, I didn't know something. There was no cooking up anything, because you can never cook a thing correctly. There will always be inconsistencies and you'll be found out. So that was it. And we had our SSB was fairly good. I remember, I think we had almost about 8 people out of those 40 odd candidates who finally got selected. And we all converged back at, NDA. Okay. So it's a good experience.
Yeah. So we also know, nowadays we talk about a lot of OLQs, that is officer-like qualities. We think that a certain kind of person get recommended. That's a certain type that officers will be. So we have that perception. So we could put light on, did you ever thought about those OLQs? Did you hear about it, read about it, thought of imbibing those qualities?
Officer-like qualities are basically, once you join, these officers, during this officer-like qualities and these kind of terminology now today is out in the open domain, because people, the organization, the non-military people, I don't like to use the word civil street like a lot of people use, the non-Fauji people, they have realized that there is a lot of things that they can pick up from the forces. The corporate sector has imbibed a lot from the forces. So when the corporate sector went to the forces and saw what is there, so they picked up a key word which we use, that is called as officer-like quality, and they feel that officer-like quality is something which defines leadership. Not so. Not so. It is just officer-like qualities. You've got some trainees with you who have come from a civil background, who have come from schools, who have no idea. They may be from a Fauji background, but that doesn't make them a Fauji. Though my parents, I come from 3 generations of Fauj, that doesn't give any definition that I am automatically, deserving to join the army or get, recruited in the armed forces, and I will have all the requisites that an army requires. No. So officer-like quality just gives a very broad-based definition of what an officer is expected to be.
Okay.
So those are some targets which are laid down for people to, aspire and train, and for the academy and for the trainers to have a benchmark to gauge people. Like say, you are supposed to display loyalty. Again, we'll discuss it, more when you talk about it in the later half. You supposed to have integrity. There is a morality with which you assign yourself, because you're going to lead people. Correct. So an officer is expected to have morality. An officer is expected to be loyal to the organization. So this is an officer-like quality. It doesn't mean that person who's not an officer doesn't have this quality or does not require to have this quality. Correct. You are in an organization. The organization will expect the same things from you. Correct. So that's all it is. So I would tell people outside here, don't get carried away by the definition of an officer-like quality and then start listing it down and then seeing how to reach that. No, when you are in an SSB, that will fail you. That will fail you. You be yourself. Be true to the learnings. जो अपने बाप दादाओं ने सिखाया हमारे को, what a good citizen is expected, what a good human being is expected, what a good person is expected, as a good son, as a good father, as a good teammate, as a good colleague. Those are all officer-like qualities.
Correct. Got it, sir. So we'll come to your NDA part, because you would have gone to National Defense Academy, then to IMA. It will be full of memories. So if you could share a few memories which you still cherish from your lives from NDA or IMA.
I will never forget the first day, when I joined. The NDA has got squadrons. There are those units where, cadets are put, and that's like, school, you have houses, Red House, Green House, Nagarjuna House, and Taktila House. NDA, we have squadrons. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L. So you call them Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, military terminology over there. I had been assigned with Kilo Squadron.
Okay.
Kilo Squadron is until today also is considered as the most notorious squadron, because the acronym for Kilo is killer. So we all call ourselves as killers. So when you meet an NDA person and you say which squadron, I don't say Kilo Squadron. I say I'm a killer. Correct. So that Kilo Squadron always thought we were the most ruthless people, and fundamentally everybody is a commando over there. So I remember when I entered the hallowed portals of Kilo Squadron, a civilian literally with hair and all, and I came there with my trunk and my suitcase. And when I entered it, there was every term break they whitewash the squadron. Between 2 terms there is a break, and during that break maintenance happens, and the walls and all are cleaned up. Furniture is changed, polished, and the next term comes after a winter break or a summer break. So we landed up there, and they were being whitewashed, and we had a sergeant major who was standing there to welcome all the newcomers. So he asked me a question, me and a couple of others who were there. Do you know? And earlier probably there were some stains over there. Some red colored, kisi ne geru veru lagaya hoga. So they were cleaning. So he said, why are we cleaning this? So people gave all kinds of answers which we thought was a very right answer. And somebody said, to remove those stains, red stains. So what are these red stains? Somebody thought, I must give a good answer. Blood stains. Correct. So everybody said, oh, blood stain, my God, so much. So, why are we doing this cleaning? And, so we are preparing you. So the question was that, what are you expecting from this squadron, from this NDS? Everybody said we'll become this, and officers, and we'll become this and that. He says, here he says, what you're going through in this squadron for the next 3 years, you'll never ever go through that ever again. So literally what he said was, after the screw you get over here, nobody can ever screw you this much. So life is going to be very easy for you if you survive these 3 years over here and get out of this squadron. So that is something which, which is written here in my mind, and I have actually seen that in my life. Nothing has ever daunted me. Nothing has ever, felt as though one couldn't do it, because that is the kind of training that the academy gives you. And it's not only Kilo Squadron; it's with everybody. Just that I was Kilo, so that was an impression with which I entered that particular squadron, and I maybe thought for a moment ki hey Bhagwan, main kidhar aa gaya yaar type, but then one had to shake it off, because that's what you wanted, and you knew that if you wanted to be an officer or get commissioned and serve, you had to go through this. You had to go through this. So that is one thing. Second, and the most important thing which we learned in the academy, which we thought, was the camaraderie, the team spirit. What it taught was, there is no individual there. There is a course. There is a batch. Whatever happens, it is a batch. So the batch has to sit down and sort out everybody internally. So if there are 2 guys who are indisciplined in the batch, the entire batch gets sorted out. Right? And of course, there are various codes that you don't squeal on your team, and you don't, rat out your people, and chugli nahi karte ho tum. All that is basically, they're teaching you to, be a team player, be together, watch each other's backs. Because that's what you're going to do for the next 30, 40 years, or even beyond. Today I am not in the Fauj, but I know that if I pick up a phone and I call up somebody, and I tell them somewhere in Chennai or somewhere in Kolkata that, my brother is there, he's stuck in the railway station, there is a curfew. That man is going to leave his wife in the market and go and pick up my brother first and drop him home, and then maybe go and search for his wife, where he left her, or even forgot. Because that's the commitment that he has sworn. We all have sworn to each other. So we drop everything, and we are there for the postmates first. Our families know that, our children know that, our parents know that. So that is something you learn, and at that time, you feel that you're getting bagad, are yaar galti usne kiya aur hum sabko ragda lag raha hai yahan par. Early morning, 3 o'clock, we are all standing up there because that chap decided to, listen to song or come 10 minutes late for the PT, ground. But later on, you realize why that was there. What is it that is giving you? And, then you had incentives, to do something well. That you pass your drill quickly, then you get an opportunity to, go out on liberty. So you get an out pass, where you are allowed to, on a Sunday, go out to Pune, and feel good about yourself and strut around over there like you're an NDA or somebody very different. Irrespective of what the hell other person was looking at you and thinking, he must be thinking, ye kaun, bilkul Shatrumurg jaise, bilkul ganja ho gaye, tie wai pen ke aaye. It didn't make a difference. We were different. We were special people over there, and we made sure that everybody, kind of realized that we are special. So for that, you had to, achieve. So there would be somebody who would slink out quietly and get caught over there, and then come back, and then the whole course would again fall in together. So, we would beat that guy up and tell him, yaar, tu aisa mat kara kar. But then we knew that's all part of the fun. So those are the kind of, then we had, in the term break, Pune station only had academy cadets over there, because everybody was going on the term break. So there were special trains which would be called as the NDA special, which would start from Pune and go up north till Delhi and Jammu, and it had only cadets. And the trains would not stop on the major platforms, because people are worried that if 300, 400 cadets come out, what the hell is going to happen? It's like a jailbreak or something like that. People are coming out. So it would always stop in some God forsaken, platform. And if some courageous vendor would come there with mumfali or, rabdi patties or something like that, he would sell everything off in 10 minutes time. Because, people are hungry. We were always hungry. We were always hungry. So that NDA special was itself a complete holiday. It was like a vacation trip, it was like, going, we never knew how that journey got over because it was dhamal masti totally. There was nobody to point, tell us what to do, and we were left to ourselves. And train would stop at some godforsaken place, and everybody would get down, and then the train had to start. So everybody had to be, hauled back, and somebody's missing. The counting would happen, and it was a great fun over there. So those are some of these memories, good memories, that you take back from your academy.
Yeah. So if you could also tell us, you got commissioned in the Corps of Engineers. So how did, you evolve from a young lieutenant to, colonel? So what were the various learning? Anything special that you want to, share with the audience? A lot of aspirants will be watching it. A lot of people who got recommended recently will also be listening to you.
Yeah, see, the question here is, for the aspirants, firstly, it is that you need to get through the academy. You need to do well in the academy, because academy, you want to join a particular, corps or a service or infantry or armored or whatever it is. There are limited, vacancies. So it is on the merit basis. Like they lay out a list out a merit, and then depending upon your merit, you are asking 3, 4, 6 choices from every individual, and you may get your choice. You may get a choice of the arm, but you may not get the choice of your battalion. So your focus would be do well in the academy. Learn whatever you can learn over there. Get your choice as best as possible, irrespective of whether you get a choice or not. All units are good. And when you actually reach a unit, your actual learning starts in the unit. What you have taught, what you have learned in the academy is theory. It just gives you an overview. You are actually, when you join the academy, join the unit as a second lieutenant, that is where the test starts of you, and that's where the learning starts. It is the unit, the officers over there, your seniors, your jawans, your JCOs, who are actually going to shape you, teach you how to be an officer and how to be a gentleman and a soldier and a compassionate person and a ruthless disciplinarian. All those things are being taught over there. What you need to do is you need to be willing to learn. You can't think that, okay, I have got a brass on my shoulder now, so I am God's gift to this into this unit or this army, and now I'm a fala sand and I can do whatever. It's not going to work. You have to you need to know that everybody who's there in that unit, when you stepped in for the first time, is senior to you in experience, is senior to you in age, in service, and in knowledge. So every individual, whether it is that sentry who's standing at the gate and who's saluting you, not because you are Chandan Kumar or you are, son of so-and-so. It is just because you are wearing an OG and you got 2 stars on your shoulder, which tells that person कि ये lieutenant साहब जो है तुम्हारे senior हैं, तुम्हारे commander हैं. So he is going to lead you from tomorrow. So he is saluting that. That's all. It's only when you learn and you learn to earn respect. You can't command respect. It has to be earned. It is earned by personal example. It is earned by baptism by fire. You are actually put through various things. So every unit has a history. So similarly, when I joined my unit had a history. It's been there since it got raised in 67. Before that, also there were people there. It has fought 71 war. It has fought various insurgency activities. It has been in all kinds of high altitude areas. So there were very seasoned people in the unit, who have been born there, brought up there. So they ensured that I learned. Now, whether willing or unwilling, I have to learn if I have to survive. If I have to, make a mark, if I have to earn my respect and be a leader, I have to learn. So when I got my regiment and I joined the regiment, that's where my journey started. As a lieutenant, I joined. Then they sent me for a course, which is called a Young Officers course, where you go and you actually learn now trade-specific, core-specific knowledge of Corps of Engineers, combat engineering, how you do that, how does the combat engineering work in battle, in peacetime, and then it's a 6 months course. Then you come back to the unit. Now you are qualified to actually start commanding men, because now you have done that Young Officers course. You know what what the hell is happening on ground. And then it's a on-job training. I mean, it's nothing different than you join, say, Tata Motors, correct? You may be a graduate engineer from IIT, but you join the floor first. Correct. You actually go there and see how a lathe machine is being operated, how the foundry shop operates, how the electrical shop operates. Because these are not taught in the engineering school and college. Correct. Who is a foreman, who is a machinist, and who is a supervisor, and what is the role of that? What is shift system? Like what is a siren? And you eat with them, you live with them. So it's the same thing. You eat with your men, you live with your men, and slowly you learn from the men. You learn who is what. And the men learn what you are and who you are. And that's where the men start looking up to you, because whatever you may say, you have a higher level of training. You have a higher qualification. You expected to have a higher level of intelligence and, forethought. And that's what the men want. Men want decisions. Men want, somebody to look after them. So that's what you learn. So that's what I learned. And then, as when you have these promotion exams which you have to give to get your next rank. So during my days, for a captain and major, there were substantial ranks where you had to give a part B and part D exams, and you had to clear that, and then basis your service, you pick up that rank. Then from major onwards, for lieutenant colonel and colonel, it's a selection board during my days. Now, of course, it's a time scale. So there was a selection board. So then the selection board decides, they go through your performance, they go through your various, appraisals, what you call, outside, in the outside world, we call it confidential reports, annual confidential reports. There is a whole metrics which they work out. And then depending upon how many people are expected, to go to the next level, they select them. Then you get the rank of a lieutenant colonel. Then again, it's a pyramid, so people keep, falling off and people keep rising. And it's not that because you not made the cut, you are, no good anymore. It's a pyramid. That's all. It's just that the other person performed better than you. That's all. That's the only thing. And it's luck sometimes, plays, because it's vacancy based, right? So if you're lucky, some courses have a larger vacancy. There is a war, more people have died, so there are more vacancies. Sometimes suddenly there is something else happening in Civil Street and people want to leave, and there is a sudden surge in when Informa IT came up and a lot of openings came up. So a lot of people felt it's a good opportunity to go out and see better prospects. So suddenly more vacancies came. So there are the factors are very different. But that's how you grow, and then you pick up your rank, whether it's colonel, brigadier, and keep going. And at every rank, your responsibilities increase, your area of responsibilities increase, your accountability increases, right? Your the level of expectations of the organization increases. So that's how the growth has been. So I was in the unit, then I got posted out. I went to staff. I was as an instructor in the center for recruits. I was as an instructor in the College of Military Engineering, where I was teaching management and things to the diploma holders who were coming there. Then I had a stint in the commandos as a black cat for 3 years. So that's how the life has been.
Okay, sir, if you could also tell us, how did you end up joining NSG? So was it your decision? The unit tells us, not sure. How does that happen?
It is NSG. I always, there was a huge dichotomy in my mind. I wanted to do engineering always. So there was that fact that I wanted to be a technically qualified person. So Corps of Engineers, I joined Corps of Engineers. So yes, the government gave me a civil engineering degree, so that's good. But I also wanted to be a commando, because I always wanted to be part of special forces. I remember as a childhood, there was not a single commando comic that I did not read, and SAS, Special Services of the British, Second World War. I used to read all the history and all their campaigns and things like that, and then you had the Delta Force coming up and whatnot. So there was that fact that I needed to be a commando, and I knew that in my heart I would make a good commando. I thought so. I don't know what others would think. So, but when I joined the Corps of Engineers, somehow I didn't get an opportunity. There is an option to join Special Forces where you apply for it and your CO recommends it, and then you go do the probation, and if you clear that, you can join. My CO was very intelligent in the hindsight. He said, son, you have joined the Corps of Engineers. Don't do any commando shit till such time you go and do your graduation degree. Because if you get injured or something like that, you may miss out on your degree. So finish your degree first, and then if you remain fit, you opt for commandos. So I finished my degree, then I went back to the unit. Then again, the new CO came. So I said, sir, I want to join the paras. I'm very fit and I'm very active. So the CO said, son, you just come back from your degree course. This is the very important time as a captain that you should learn what is the Corps of Engineers here. So spend 3 years here, learn this, and then go. I said, okay, that's also great. So I did that, and then I was doing that. Some of the opportunities, vacancies were not there. I couldn't get that opportunity. So I realized that going to Special Forces, para commandos may not happen. NSG, there is no volunteering for that.
Okay.
Today you can ask for it, but they don't take volunteers in the sense because you've asked for it. During my days, NSG was a shortlisting. So basis the requirement of officers that are required from across the country with different profiles, the Army headquarters shortlisted people. So if they needed, say, a captain between 6 years and 9 years of service, and they needed somebody who had, say, knowledge of Corps of Engineers, or he was an engineer, so they would go to the Corps of Engineers and EME and those bracket, pull out all those people who are in that category. They had a checklist in which they needed to take off basic criteria, fitness, or integrity, loyalty, etc., whatever they had, and they would shortlist people. The fallout rate. So they would shortlist people and then they would call them. There was no option of saying no, because disciplinary action would be taken against that person once you were shortlisted, because that was the call, order of the day. It was a privilege to be there, and you could not say no. So the only way to say no was you had to go to the probation, fail in the probation, and get sent back with disgrace to the unit. Not disgrace, you would send back to the unit. So there were people who probably did that deliberately also. So you were given a call letter to go to Manesar, which was a training center, and there was the 3 months commando course probation which was run over there. The fallout rate was anything between, in my batch, we had about, I think, 10 to 12 officers who had initially shortlisted to come there. There were about 130 odd, 140 odd men, and ratios mixed. So we were about a strength of 150, 160. And I think finally about 85 or 90 only got through. There were only 3 officers who got through. I was the oldest among the 3. The rest couldn't make it. Couple of them deliberately failed and went back. Couple of them wanted to get through, but they didn't get through. So keeping the wastage rate, they call people, and so every 3 months they run every 3 to 6 months they run a course, and they keep filling the vacancies. It's a 3 years deputation with the NSG. So once you finish your probation, then you are assigned to one of the NSG units, or you may be assigned to the center as a training instructor over there on various subjects. So I was looking, what I am missing out on an opportunity when this call came, and so I went to Manesar, completed my probation, and being a Corps of Engineer officer, they wanted me to stay in the center as an instructor, but I wanted to be a commando. So, I knew that the CO of 52 was looking for somebody, and he would come, and, I saw him watching my performance, and I was a sportsman also, so I was playing and I was doing generally well. So I had an opportunity after the final, exercise to talk to Colonel Thapa. So I requested him. I said, sir, if you're looking for somebody and if there is a vacancy, I would like to join 52. So I believe he went and then, he spoke to somebody and they agreed to send me to 52. So that's how I went to my, unit, the commando unit. So my dream of being a commando on ground materialized, and that was a tenure, 3 years. I'll probably never forget even after my death.
So if you could tell us, how does a probation in NSG look like? And if you have any which you would like to share, good, bad, anything.
All right. So probation in NSG is fundamentally, the ustads, the trainees who are there. Uh, they are all ex-para commandos. Not even ex, they are para commandos. They come from the para commando units, whether it is 1-9, all of them, and they are hardcore, ruthless, Yamraj ke sage hain wo log. ठीक है ना? Their funda in life is to make sure that people get rejected. That they come with that impact कि we need to मतलब इन लोगों को खत्म कर देना यहाँ पर उस so your entire the aim in commando is to survive that day. If you go back, at the end of the day, if you when you go to sleep, if you get up next day morning, you have one more day. Otherwise, you are going home. So fundamentally, that's what is the requirement. So the entire course of para commandos of the NSG, it's got two parts. One part is the physical, right? You got to develop that level of, fundamentally you're coming with a level of physical training. So when you join the course, they have the initial physical tests, and those who don't clear the initial physical tests are put into a special category, and they get extra training for 1 month. And if that after that month they still don't make it, they're sent back home. Those who clear the initial physical test, which is an entry level test, then they every month there is a test, every 15 days, but every month there is a proper screening test. And if you don't clear that, they send you back home. Side by side, you are also learning the specialized operations of what a commando is supposed to do, how are the counter-insurgency operations done, counter-hijack operations done, anti-terrorist operations done, demolitions, firing, stealth activities, all those things which you read in, which movies show and things like that, by and large. So simultaneously, you are also learning, and there are tests for that also. I mean, just because you're tired and you're dog tired and you can't study and you go and fail in that test, you'll probably be sent back. So so it's a total test of your physical and mental abilities.
Okay.
That's what it is. As a commando, you will be pushed beyond your normal. Correct. So whether you have the capability to get pushed beyond your normal, how much of life, cat's 9 lives are there. So how can you pull out that second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth life from inside is what you learn when you're there as a commander. Okay. So those who are not able to do that are not able to get through. So then obviously they go back. So the training is focused on that. So as the days progress, the training becomes more and more tougher. I'll give you an example. So we have a 3-hour session in the morning, which starts at around say 5:30 and goes till about 8:30. 3-hour session, which is broken into 1 hour capsule. It's actually 55 minutes capsule with a 5-minute break, and then the next 55 with 5-minute break. So these capsules, you are getting rugged, you're running, jumping, doing bent stretches, climbing ropes, jumping off, again climbing rope, going into the ditch, running here, running there, and ustads are running with you. They are not standing and telling, usko chhu ke aa jao, usko chhu ke aa jao, us pe kood jao. They are doing everything that you are doing. So you got to keep up with them. You are officers, you are commandos, you have to keep up with them. Now, we realize this after the 7th or 8th day, that after 55 minutes, he used to give us 5 minutes break for water, susu, cigarette, whatever you wanted to do, and come back. So when we came back, the ustads would be all in the same tangri with beard, and we realized that this bugger is not the same chap who was there in the first half. So what actually was happening was that every 1 hour the ustad would change, but we would not change. So we would wonder कि साले हमारी तो 2 घंटे में तो जान निकल गई, उस्ताद का तो पसीना भी नहीं निकला यार, तो ये मतलब really is the commando. So that is how they would push us through. So it was when you reached back home in the evening, you knew you didn't want to eat, you just wanted to sleep. But you knew that if you didn't have food, next day you would not survive. So you had to eat. So you went, you ate, you had to take a bath, because otherwise people inside the room are going to really kill you because you are so stinky. So you had to have a bath also and change into whatever dresses you have and discard that dangri, because that was absolutely, it had all those white stains of, salt which has come out of your sweat. So you had to push it to the dhobi, you would wash it and bring it tomorrow. And whether you are in a andi or you're not in a andi, it didn't matter, you just crashed. just you were dead. And in the morning, when the alarm went off at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, you would get up and wonder ki main kahan hu type na, before you realize ki oh bloody hell, I have one more day to go through this again, and there were days left to go home. So from 90, it became 89, 88, 87, 86. Every day you would cut one day, and the closer you were getting to zero, you knew ki boss, the closer you were to actually becoming a commando. So that's how it was. Some days they would take you, 30 kilometers, 40 kilometers somewhere in some godforsaken place, give you a map, a compass, one small potli of food, and tell you, that you have about 5 hours, you reach back. And if you don't reach back at 5 hours in the gate, there is a bus waiting outside. Your luggage will be put over there. Please sit in the bus. It will take you to the station. Please go home. So, so you had to make your way back. You had to survive, from the land, get water, food, whatever is there available, and make your way back home. So these are the kind of things that you learned there. You learn to survive. You learn to depend on, each other. There was no man, officer, JCO. We were all part of one team. And everybody had to do, yes, as an officer, you were a leader of that group, but you had to do your share of cooking, you had to do your share of cleaning, you had to do your share of carrying everything. And so that's what, made a commando. And once in 15 days, they would give us half a day's break, where you could go out to Gurgaon or maybe somewhere. But you were afraid to eat anything outside because agar पेट खराब हो गया तो 2 दिन तो तुम्हारी तो हालत खराब होने वाली है. So you were very cautious. So that is how the, one remembers the commando training.
So we know about a lot of special forces. We know Marcos, we know Garud, we know guys from the parachute regiment, then the NSG. What is that exact thing that makes them special? Because we always call them special forces. How different are they from the normal troops?
They are different from the normal troops in the sense, firstly, the people do say that they are highly motivated. I believe that everybody is basically motivated. Yes, it is just that, they have been put through a specialized kind of grill, which makes them believe that they can go beyond what a normal soldier can do. It's a belief, right? It's not that somebody in my unit wearing normal OG cannot do what I have done as a special force. He can also do it. If I take him there and I give him that basic training and teach him, I know he'll be able to do it because I saw it. When I went back from my NSG to my unit was in CI operations, counterinsurgency operations in Assam, and those days, that was the worst period of Assam. And we did a lot of things. So I created a small Ghatak platoon, specialized commando platoon from my own people. And they learned very fast and they were able to do things as good as what my commando team was doing in NSG. So it is just that, you see how much more you can push. So that's where the motivation is. Where a normal unit person may not be expected to reach that, you are asked to go beyond that because you have been given some specialized training. You know what it takes to push yourself. The other person may stop at a point thinking, I can't go beyond this. Whereas you, by virtue of being a commando, know that I need to go beyond this and I'm capable of going beyond. So when you go beyond that, then there is an entirely different world. You are able to do things which the enemy or somebody never expected you to do. Because they have typecasted, this is your limit. So if I am outside this limit, I am superior to you. But I have been taught to break that and go beyond that limit. So I am going to go and then do my task and able to defeat that or achieve my objective because the person who was there didn't expect it. So that is what differentiates, fundamentally, somebody who's in a special forces from somebody from the other. Okay. But for doing that, then you are going to use them for those specialized operations. You can't use them for general operations. Otherwise, you are, it is like, having a sports car and, driving on a broken road because it doesn't work. Then you might as well have a good old ambassador to go there, right? So you need a sports car or you need that formula vehicle to run on a formula track for a separate target. So this is for a separate target. So what happens is, so when you are a commando, your operations, your requirements, all are different. You are being deployed in places where out of the ordinary things are required and expected from you. You will be equipped No doubt about it. You will have specialized weapons, you will have specialized things. But then it is the man behind the weapon which matters. Correct. I can give you a sniper weapon which can shoot 2 kilometers away. But if you don't know how to use it, how to center it and target it, it is like a Diwali gun to you. There's no difference. Correct. So it is that training, it is that deployment, not only training, it is the deployment of that forces that makes them special and different from the others.
Got it.
And the fact that the onus is there on them, that I am special and I'm expected to continue to be special. So there is that inside, there is some additional motivation that comes out. There is that expectation that I have to meet. I put on myself. That makes me different from somebody who's not in that special forces.
Okay. Got it.
So that's the key change. That's the key change between what a special forces. Besides, of course, the technical, knowledge that you carry, and you are used to operating in smaller units. You are taught to operate independently. You are taught to live off the land. You're taught to think the unthinkable and do the unexpected. So that's what is the difference.
Got it.
Otherwise, NSG, difference between an NSG and a special forces is an army unit purely under the ambit of the armed forces. NSG is a federal unit which comes under the Ministry of the Home Affairs.
Got it.
Correct. It may have people from different people, but the roles are different. The deployment, the employment roles are different. So what Marcos is for the Navy or Garud is for the Air Force, you have the SF commandos for the Army, and you have the NSG for India.
Yeah. Sir, I also know, people from all these forces also go for some training in NSG as well. Maybe for
so basically, so what is happening is that today, if you see the deployment of the forces, the armed forces or the BSF or everything is not restricted to the borders. It is inside. You are fighting terrorism somewhere, you're fighting insurgency somewhere, you're being deployed. You read in papers every day, what the army is doing or what, the Air Force is doing and how the Navy is helping out. So to do that, you got to rethink the tactics to be used for targets inside and targets outside are very different. The entire scenario is different. So NSG, by virtue of right from day one being employed for these kind of things, we have that infrastructure over there. And you have people, like I said, who are trained over there and everything. So that has become a training hub. So the CRPF or the BSF or the state police, now there is only so many people in the NSG who can who can do everything. So there are the local, say, Naxalite, there is a fight over there. There are fights in urban, terrorism happening in cities over there, where people firing is happening, and you saw what Kasab did or whatever. So you need local state machinery to also tackle that. Correct. You can't keep calling NSG every time, everywhere. So many people are not there. It's a specialized force to be used for specialized activities. So how do they do that? So they are trained so there are select people. So you have the Andhra police used to have what they call as the greyhounds. Correct. So they were trained in specialized activities to counter, the Naxalite areas and, Gadchiroli area and all those areas. So they would come. Tamil Nadu had some forces. Now Punjab police has got commandos. Maharashtra police has got commandos. So most police forces have commandos. So they are specialized people within their own organization. So they are sent. So they come to Manesar and they undergo through these courses which are there. The bomb disposals of the state. Every state has got a bomb disposal team. Correct. So NSG has extremely competent and talented bomb disposal people who go and get training done in Israel, and we get trained in Russia and with the American team, and we have joint exercises. So there is a lot of knowledge and technical know-how available in Manesar. So these people go there, they participate in that, they train in that. So what happens is when there is a requirement of deployment, there is an untoward incident happening, then there is a joint activity that happens. There is a joint command where even energy is probably brought in there, the state machinery is there, the CRPF is also there. So everybody knows what is required to be done, and then there is a synergy between between all these forces operating, and we don't be counterproductive to each other, but everybody is in sync.
Being a commando, is there any existence of fear of failure in your mind while you go on an operation?
Some grizzled old guy once told me about this. There is nothing wrong in being afraid. You should have fear of the unknown, because what happens is fear makes you cautious. Correct. But it should not dampen your courage. Failure is not in your hand entirely, because say, for example, what example you are giving, you're doing for a commando operation, you're operating in an unknown territory against an unknown adversary. Correct. You have very limited knowledge. Kasab hai banda, he's taking a weapon and he's with 3 guys he's shooting. You may have an idea of what kind of weapon he's shooting. You may not know whether there are 3 guys or 4 guys. You may not know whether that guy has got a human bomb. You may not know whether he's carrying a missile with him, or he's just got a toy pistol katta hai. You don't. So there is a lot of unknown factor on the other side. Correct. So is success guaranteed? Never. Success can never be guaranteed. When you play a match, the topmost player, Tendulkar or Bradman, with 99.9. Correct. Everybody thought that, his last match, he will score at least 4 runs and make it. He was out on duck. The ultimate, getting an average of 100, the whole world thought he'll get it, but he couldn't get it. Correct. How many times Tendulkar has gone and duck, or how many times, Federer has lost, come back and, defeated, or how many. So success can never be guaranteed. So if success is never guaranteed, don't have the fear of failure. Correct. You should be confident of success. I would say that. Be confident of what you are doing. When you're going there, idea is not ki, will I fail? If you're going with that idea that will I fail, there is a good chance that you will not succeed, because you are not thinking correct. If you go, when you go for an operation or whatever you do, it is an outcome of unmeasurable amount of practice. It's practice. When you give a final exam, it is out of practice. Correct. You have sat down and you have done all your solutions 20 times. You have, opened your book and taken those examples and, made those things 30 times. Your father makes you write, question papers 100 times. What is that? It is practice. Correct. It is not mugging. It is practicing. Practicing the knowledge which you have to give an outcome. So when you get into why are you practicing every day? So that when the time comes for delivery, you are confident that whatever you have learned, you will be able to put to use. Will that give you success? As an outsider, if you ask somebody may say, how do I know that? To you, it is not a question of, will I get success? I'm going with a presumption that I will succeed or I will perish. In the army, there is no coming back. They say there is no second place. Correct. You are a winner. You only do there for a winner, or for all purposes you are dead. So you are going there with the premise that you are going to achieve your objective. Okay. Yeah. Correct. So if you go with that premise, then there should not be a fear of failure in your mind. What if agar aa gaya tumhare dimag mein, so you will not be able to think logically. You have trained for it. Just go and do it. That is what we all are taught, and that is what, as a leader, you have to display, because your men are looking up to you. If there is fear on your face, or if there is a doubt on your face, it will get multiplied, when it goes down to your people under you. So clarity of thought and absolute conviction of your action. That is what is required.
How you maintain your social life and your life as a commando? A balance between both of them.
Yes. So if I talk about NSG, every unit has different things. So in NSG, there are times when you are on red alert. That means you are, you have to be within, say, 30 minutes or something. You have to be able to reach a particular location and take off for your operations. So you are on red alert. There is no social life for you at that time. You have a family and you know that, but your social life is such that you can't go out anywhere too much. Maybe you can't go and watch a movie, or if you are watching a movie, you've got to be ensured that the moment that call comes, whether on a pager or whatever is the message. Though my days we didn't have mobiles and all, and so we had only pagers. So you need to immediately leave your wife, your children, whatever it is, give them 20 rupees, auto pakad ghar pahunch ja, ye chabi pakad, jai hind, goodbye. And if God willing, otherwise my will is written over there. That kind of thing. So you moved out. You didn't know where you were going. You didn't know why you were going. Everything was there. Once you reach there, it's all under. So that was one part of your life, which was a cyclic part. Then obviously, you can't continue to live like that. There has to be a time where, R&R is required. You need to recharge your batteries. You need to think back. You need to sit back and do your administrative activities, both at the unit level as well at your home. People have to go on leave. Jawans have to go on leave. People have to do their exams. People have to improve. They have to do skill training. So you have a period of, lean period where you get leave, where you are able to do your administrative work, catch up with your social life, and then there is then the third period is where you actually are going to train. You have to constantly train. Then new things are happening. So there is a cycle of training, where you move out with your people from your barracks and go to a particular place. It could be a 1 month, 15 days, 2 months, 3 months, and carry out training exercises, mock drills, and test everything. Teach the new people who are coming there. So try out new things, do R&D, make your reports. So your entire tenure, if you take a year of life, this entire year is broken down into these modules. There could be 2 months module, 3 month module, 6 month module, whatever it is. So that's how the commando life used to be there. Social life is you have a unit which is a family. There are children there are wives, there are parents living with them. So at whatever opportunity we get together, and we may go out on a picnic sometime. We may have a party in the mess. There are, welcome parties for people who are coming new, break-in parties. There are farewell parties for people who are moving out. There could be birthdays, there could be anniversaries. So these are small things which we get together and celebrate. So this is one social life which is part of your organization. Whether you are in the army, you're a commando, or in any other unit. Then you have the other social life also, which is your non-service life. Your wife could be working, so she has a set of people you are interacting as a spouse. They may be coming home, you may be going there. She also has a set of parties. Those days were gone where ladies were not working, so ladies in the army had a higher responsibility toward. These days, ladies are working, they have their own life, so you have to accept that, you have to accommodate that in your circle, and you have to expect that your juniors or your jawans also are going to have that kind of life. The ladies may not be available all the time, and you have to be a part of their social life also. You can't stand aloof and say, no, I am an army officer and everything revolves around me. It doesn't happen. So to have an effective, harmonious life, both in the family as well as in your unit, that is another social circle. So you go, you mingle with them. You have children who are in school, so there is a parents, teachers, circle. You have, a group of people, your children coming over, your children going there. So you want to know, so you are inviting them, birthday of your child. So your society you're living in, so they are people. So there are these groups. Sometimes you realize that you can't mix these groups, and make one larger group because it doesn't gel. Sometimes it may gel, it may not gel. So social life is entirely in your hand. There is no restriction from the organization. Organization encourages you to be social. Organization encourages you to participate in, non-military activities. But at every time, the onus is there. You are an officer and a gentleman. So your conduct is always looked at, watched at. Somebody, on the road does some mischief, makes some noise, does some gadar and goes away. People don't notice. But, somebody in uniform or somebody known to be, whether it's a police officer or whether it is a army guy, navy guy, or whether it is a BSF guy, a uniform makes you stand out. So you got to be very careful of your conduct, of your behavior in public. So those are something which you carry with you. I mean, that is a burden that you carry with you, and it makes you a better gentleman and a better person. So those are we go out on vacations like everybody else. We are also human beings. We have families. We take a break. We have leave with us. We drive around. Go to far off places, have fun, and come back.
Good.
Till today, as a commando, which is your favorite weapon?
Which is my favorite weapon? Okay, I always, preferred a pistol. Though I had I had the Heckler and Koch automatic weapon, which we were used. Those days only we had. Then subsequently it has come to various other people. Modernization has taken place. But I was very comfortable with my Glock 9, and it had become an extended. I was, I pride myself. I was one of the best shots, in my unit, and I always was able to be among the top people in various competitions and all. And my unit always won the firing competition all the 3 years. And I always had the opportunity of, being part of the training team to train people on these competitions. So I was good at firing. I still am. And Glock was my preferred weapon. I used to love that weapon. I knew inside out. I could strip it open and strip it quickly without any problem. I don't remember what our timing and all. But yes, pistol was my preferred weapon. And even after, when I went back to my unit in insurgency operations, though AK-47 everybody carries, it was always there with me in my vehicle. But I always carried my pistol, and I used it quite efficiently and effectively.
Why the NSG commandos are called Black Cat commandos? Is there any specific story behind it?
Specific story inside. You see, if you look at it, though it's a lore, it is not written anywhere. But what people say about is that the Black Panther is supposed to be the most silent and the most dangerous animal. The Black Panther, jo hota hai. So all these panthers and these are part of cat family. It's called as a cat. So Kali Billi also, if you look at it in Hindi, Kali Billi सबसे अपशगुन वाली चीज होती है. मतलब अगर काली बिल्ली तुम्हारा रास्ता काट गई तो तुम्हारा तो ओम नमो स्वाहा हो गया, सोच लो. Correct. So that is what it is. So don't cross a Kali Billi, otherwise you had it. So it's that. So the association with that is like that. You are a silent operator. You don't give any quarters. People will not know when you come, and people better not cross your path. Mm-hmm. So that's why. So our emblem, if you see, the emblem of a Black Cat commando is a yellow badge with a black, panther with its teeth out. So right. That is why it's Black Cat. So, and we are commandos, so we call it Black Cat commandos. Okay. And we wear black dangris. And we have black, everything black from top to bottom.
Commander didn't go on operation on daily basis. So how Commander keep himself motivated and doing that same training on daily basis?
Yes. So that is what I said, it is a drill. That's what makes you special, and, gives you that, when I told you, that when I am actually required to do something, I have the confidence that I will succeed. I'm not worried about failure. Why do I have the confidence that I'm succeeded? Because I've done it a million times. Correct. And in my mind, I have played out all alternatives. And I've catered for that unforeseen thing which I don't know about. So I am ready in my mind to face that small part of unknown. So I'm confident. So when you talked about, the fear of failure, I don't have the fear of failure. Why? Because of training, because of repeated training. So it is up to me. If you see an athlete, forget about a commando, right? Now you see an athlete who has to go and participate in the national games. So, or you see a cricketer, who's practicing in the net. Correct. So how does the bowler know, or how does the coach know that this guy is going to deliver? It is by the practice, by the amount of times he's practiced, and amongst those 10 people, who is the person who's performing the best. It is training, and only training. And when you're finished training, you train some more. That is the law. Correct? So that is what gives you confidence. So when nothing is happening, training is happening. So you are training for physical fitness, because you have to be fit. You don't know how long and how far you are going to be out there. So we have all these standards of training. Whatever we did in the commando course, it doesn't finish with the commando course. Those things are continued, and people are put through, and we have, these tests, physical tests, which all of us have to keep giving. And if somebody fails that physical test and is not able to bring it up, there is a chance that you will be sent back to your unit immediately. Okay. Because then you become a liability to that unit. Because if you're not physically fit, then you are going to be the weak link in that team. There could be a 4-man team, and if one person is not fit, you are in trouble. You can't take him. If you can't take him, he's a baggage. So then you politely send him back to the unit. Similarly, firing. There is no second chance. There is no second chance. You got to hit your target in the first chance. So you got to fire. Fire when you're asleep, fire when you're awake, fire with one eye closed, fire with both eyes closed. So you're constantly training on how to use your weapons in different environments, in different types. Correct. So you are training on how to fire, you're training on how to do that, you're training on stealth, you're training not to be detected, you're training to read your direction finding. How do you read a compass? How do you read the maps? How are you going to go to an unfamiliar terrain and quickly get familiar with that training? So this is the time when you are not on operations, is the time when you train. So like I said, even when you're on red alert, you're training. Then there is a complete training cycle where you go back to the basics. You go to the place where the equipment is. You go to people who are there, and teams are formed, and then you are actually given live training.
Okay.
That is what you do. You only train and train and train. You read and you train, and you learn and you train, and you pick up new things and you train.
So my last question to you would be, since most of the aspirants will be watching this video, what will be your message to the defense aspirants, who try for armed forces and do not make it up? Some people try multiple times and do not make it. What will be your message to all those defense aspirants who will be watching this?
See, I would say that, army is not the be all and end all. Correct. If it was only army and nothing else, then the country would have only army. Correct. That is not the case. Every aspect, every facet of life, is important. You may be a civil service, you may be an IAS, IPS, you may be, a businessman, you may be a farmer, you may be a manufacturer, you may be in the corporate service, civil engineer, whatever it is. You may be an architect, a designer, an artist. Army is not the be all and end all. If you have not made it to the army, I would always say that there is a larger purpose in life for you. God has given you a larger purpose. You wanted to try out this, it didn't work. Go somewhere else, do something, listen to your heart. If you get demoralized because you didn't make it, then it will prevent you from giving out your best. Mm-hmm. It will prevent you from giving out your best, which is unfair. Unfair to yourself, because you are capable of so much more. You need to dig down inside, forget about that, and dig down inside and search. What is it that is there? What do you want to do, in life? You will find the answer. It may take some time, You will find the answer, I'm sure. And try various things. There are people, who have not got through NDA and then they've gone. They have attempted an IMA, they have not got through IMA. There are people who have gone, my colleagues are there who have joined NDA, and because of some mishap in the NDA, broke a leg and something, they could not complete the training and they have gone outside, and they are doing fantastically well outside. I mean, they are CEOs of companies, MDs of companies, they are having their own industries, they are kings in real estate. So they have done whatever they needed to do. I am still in touch with a couple of my SSB batchmates who didn't get through. And, they are, one of them is he started his own institutions. And there is one person who has actually joined an SSB training and saying that because I could not make it so many times, I'll be able to tell you what I did wrong, or maybe, what I did, I should have done, or couldn't do, or I did, I should not have done. So maybe you can learn something, in the army, we have what is called as a white demo and a black demo. Okay. Whenever you teach something, you always teach them not only how it is to be done, you also teach them how it should not be done. Correct. So when you're teaching somebody to box, you tell them this is the right way to do, and you also tell them if you do this, this is what is going to happen. So, he said, I am the black demo over there. Correct. So look at the positivity with which that person has taken his, his rejection from the SSB. And he's a very sought after, he used to be. Now, of course, he's retired now. Now he says, I've got my, organic farming, and, I'm doing that. So there is no end. There are no doors which are locked. Mm-hmm. My advice to everybody would be that before that, aspirants, everybody is aspirant, everybody wants to. You need to see internally also. What is it? Why are you joining the army? If you are joining the army because you are motivated, then it makes sense. And then, but if you are joining the army because there is no other alternative, or you look at it as a pensionable government service that I'm going to get, correct, there is a good chance that you may fault, because the people who are evaluating you are able to ascertain that. Correct. So if they feel that you don't have it in you for what is required, then you may not make the cut. Right. So if you are, that is where the whole thing is. So if you not made the cut, probably, you may, even if you join, you may not be happy.
Got it.
You may not be happy. You may not be able to survive the requirements of the armed forces. So you will be more unhappy while wearing the uniform, whereas you would have probably done a great job outside and be of a greater help to the nation as such. So I'm nobody to tell somebody that you are correct or wrong. It is everybody's individual choice. But no need to get disheartened because the army is not the be all and end all. There is a glamour which you see over here, which prompts a lot of people to don that uniform and be amongst them. But there is a lot of things behind the glamour, which is a tough life, which is a very difficult life. And if you didn't make it, and you like to have a tough life, there are so many other things you could do and still serve the nation.
So it was really nice, talking to you for more than an hour, and people who will be watching it will learn a lot of things from you and how life in army looks like, especially the life of an NSG commando, because a lot of people want to know.
A normal human being, when I shave, I also cut, I also bleed, like probably Akash you do or Yogesh you do. Nothing, it's just here,
Yeah.
And I hope, I can motivate more people, because we need youngsters today in the armed forces. We need people who are motivated and who feel that, they are there to serve the nation, to join the army or the navy or the air force or even the police or BSF or CRPF, whatever it is. Thank you again. Thank you very much. And it was nice talking to you, Akash and Yogesh. I wish you all the best. And I think it's a great thing that you're doing this.